Welcome to the Talent Development Hot Seat, a show where I interview business executives, talent development professionals, and thought leaders to find out what has been successful and challenging in the world of talent development. My objective is to share ideas, valuable lessons, tools, advice, and trends. My hope is that all of this will ultimately help you, the listener, expand your knowledge, grow your career, and accelerate your success as a talent development professional. Welcome back to the Talent Development Hot Seat. I am your host, Andy Storch, and I am excited that you are joining me today for an interview with Chris Grosskreutz, who is a leadership and organizational effectiveness expert. For the past 20 years, he has worked as a researcher and strategic advisor to leaders across healthcare, finance, manufacturing, government, and education. Currently, Chris leads Slalom's organizational effectiveness practice in Detroit, and he also has a new book coming out called Future Ready Leadership: Strategies for the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And I'm excited to dig into this topic. Chris, welcome to the Talent Development Hot Seat.
Good to be in the hot seat, Andy. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to have you on. We were introduced by Massimo Bacchus, who was on a little while back, had a very popular episode. We talked about vulnerability and developing trust. That was episode 70. And of course, he works with you at Slalom Consulting, which is based out of Seattle, but I know you run the practice there in Detroit. And so I'm interested to hear a little bit about that, and especially to dig into some of the topics from your book here about future ready leadership. I think people are always interested in talking about trends. What does the future look like? How do I prepare my leaders for the future? And so I think that'll be fascinating to talk about that today. But before we get into that, maybe you can share a little bit of your background and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. So my background started when, in this field, basically my first exposure to this work of organizational transformation. I had a neighbor here in the Detroit area who worked for General Motors, and he did a lot of team building work between unions and the administrators. And I thought the coolest thing about his job back in the late 70s, early 80s was that he got to take leaders to ropes courses, which of course ropes courses are not exactly the most innovative way to develop teams anymore, but that really started a lifelong journey of falling in love with helping leaders transform their business, change their organizations. So it took me on a 10-year journey of, getting my PhD in human and organizational processes, lots of internal consulting, lots of external consulting. I've consulted 2 consulting firms, several of them, and met great people along the way. I do want to definitely give a shout out to Moss for connecting us because, as you can imagine, I've been a part of a lot of learning and development interventions over the years. I've been to a lot, I've led a lot, and my experience of him as a facilitator and as a development professional was just absolutely top notch. Some of the best development I've received in my career. I encourage your viewers to go watch that episode, and looking forward to chatting with you today.
Yeah, that is a really good one. And yeah, you've had leadership positions in Gallup and Trinity, and you mentioned consulting with consulting companies. I've also done consulting for consulting companies. I've worked with a lot of the big four, like KPMG, EY, Accenture, stuff like that. It's always fun and interesting because I definitely can relate to some of the things they're going through, maybe more than someone at a different type of company. But let's get into some of the work and the research you did, and this book, Future Ready Leadership. Where did this come from? Why did you write the book, and who's it for?
Yeah, it's a great question. Here's a picture.
There it is. It's a beautiful cover. I like it.
Thanks, man. So the idea came from working with several clients who were asking themselves, what do we need to do to prepare our organization, to prepare our workforce for all of these fourth industrial revolution megatrends that are coming, from everything from data and analytics to automation to 3D printing, robotics. What does this mean for our organization? And one of the most powerful stories, I was talking with an HR executive who was a client, and she said she walked into one of their 3D printing facilities in Europe and was floored because it was kind of like the old Twilight Zone episode where she walked in and she said, "Where are all the people?" And there were like 4 engineers sitting up in a booth as these 3D printing processes were layering out the products that they manufacture. And she had an aha. I had this aha with 10 or 12 clients over the last 5 years, where they're really, really getting to an inflection point of how do we prepare the workforce, and more importantly, how do we evolve the mindset of our leaders, the tool sets that we have in our organizations, and the behaviors that we're enacting to really prepare ourselves for what's ahead, which is both, I say, promising and really exciting, but there's also some pitfalls that leaders need to look out for.
Yeah, and so there are a lot of questions out there, right? And there's good advice that if you find yourself helping clients or people with similar things, then it might be time to write a book or create a course or something like that that's more
Yeah.
repeatable. But still, a lot of people don't sit down and actually write a book. So what did that process look like for you, and why? What was the why for you to write this book?
Yeah, I think it's Maya Angelou who said, if there's a book that you're looking for and you can't find it, it's your responsibility to write it. But
Mm.
I saw a lot of quote unquote thought leaders talking about fourth industrial revolution trends. They were talking about the technology itself. They weren't providing solutions for the human beings who today still run organizations. They weren't providing solutions and guidance for leaders. They weren't providing tools and techniques. And I mean, getting a PhD in this stuff, working with clients for 20 years, I read at least one or two books a month. I'm still pretty old school. I actually read the book. I don't listen to them. I could probably get to 4 or so a month if I listen to them on my commute. But I was tired of the type of leadership book that says, here's an interesting concept, hire us to consult with you if you want to learn more, or here's some interesting data, here's how you can figure out how to solve for these problems that we've identified. So I did, the process was one of really scouring all of the really great reports that are out there from consultancies to academic researchers on the future of work. There's been several great books about how professions will change. The World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab has a great book on the fourth industrial revolution and how it will change global economies. So I really did a nice review of everything that's out there, so readers will get really grounded in the knowledge that's out there about how these megatrends are impacting organizations from a macroeconomic perspective and from a microeconomic perspective. And then I said, let me take every tool and technique that I've found to be effective over the last 20 years for solving for some of the human demands that the fourth industrial revolution places on leaders. And so the book really has 25 actionable frameworks, tools, techniques, assessments that are inside the book that basically, if a leader got on a plane in New York and got off in LAX, they could go to a meeting and implement one of these conversation guides, one of these assessments, or one of these frameworks to have a meaningful conversation about how should our company be preparing for what lies on the horizon in our industry.
Yeah, and things are changing so much, and so leaders and companies would be wise to try to stay on top of these trends, to read about what's going on and start trying to figure out how do you prepare for the future. You mentioned the fourth industrial revolution, and then a lot of other quote mega trends that are happening. So can you describe what that means? What is the fourth industrial revolution, and what are some of these other mega trends that you're seeing?
Sure. So the first chapter dives into, it's actually subtitled "A Very Brief History of the Fourth Industrial Revolution." We could have, there have been entire books written about, the assembly line. But basically, when you look at the global economy, there have been 4 major economic eras that have kind of defined modern human history. They're generally driven by technological innovation. So the first being the steam engine, the second being automation in terms of assembly line, interchangeable parts. Some of the big names that mark buildings and organizations here in Detroit, Ford, Chrysler, General Motors, all of the emergence of the mechanization and the automation of interchangeable parts. That's all 2IR innovation. When we start to think of our own careers here, and I think you and I are about the same age, a little bit of salt and pepper going on. But when we think of, I mean, I remember going to college and people weren't using email, but they started to as I was in college. And so you think of the third industrial revolution as really kind of the rise of the internet, and the fourth industrial revolution is really defined by, and I love the World Economic Forum's definition of this. It's a confluence of the biological, the physical, and the digital world. All of those things are kind of merging. And I think, self-driving cars, autonomous vehicles, I spent a lot of time in Pittsburgh over the last several years, and that's where Uber's autonomous program is headquartered. And so you have this confluence of how do we navigate the digital streets of Pittsburgh, which was absolutely selected because they have lots of complex streets, a lot of one-ways, all weather conditions. So how do we navigate the physical world with the digital capabilities that we now have? And there's plenty of other cases in the book where, as we look at kind of the future of medical technologies, I do a case study of a drug called Chimera in there, which the FDA literally said, we're entering a new frontier of medical technology where we can reprogram human cells to attack a deadly cancer. You see this computer digital sort of language merging with the physical and biological world every day. All you have to do is kind of like look at your news feed, and there's another example of an autonomous program, a 3D printing program, a robotic program that some company is launching. Uber's kind of VTOL program where they're going to be flying me over I-75 from Detroit to my home. You don't have to look far to really say the future of mobility, the future of where we live, where we work, how we feed ourselves, how we care for our bodies, how we care for our children is all radically changing. So we really need to step up. Those are really the mega trend pieces of the question.
Yeah, we see this all around us. I pay attention to, I'm not deep ingrained in what's going on in technology, but seeing AI and how that's changing things, and how, cars are going to be automated in the near future. I always like to throw that out as a conversation piece. I have 2 young children. I tell people my kids are never going to drive a car, because by the time they're grown up, cars will be fully automated and they will need to. And that's going to be the same for a lot of things in our society that are going to completely change, which means companies will have to change what they're creating, what they're producing, how they're interacting. So how do companies prepare their people for this, this revolution that we're in and this future of work?
So, I mean, I always say that organizations change at the pace of leadership alignment. So I really do feel that starting these conversations at the executive level, nothing changes in organizations unless leaders say, yep, it's time to change it. And sometimes to the demise of, the organization itself. Sears, Kodak. I mean, these are brands that used to be behemoths, and now, when we look at the average tenure of a company on the stock exchange or whatever, it's just shrinking and shrinking by the year. So I do believe it starts with leaders. Leaders have to take ownership and stewardship and their fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders and to all of the stakeholders to say, how are we getting closer to future proofing our organization? And as I look at the wall behind me, what are we doing to build and shape a better future for our customers and for our employees? So it starts with leaders, but then there's a whole bunch of strategies when we start to get down to preparing the workforce of the future that I go into in the book.
Yeah. And so leaders have to walk the walk, right? They've got to set the example. They've got to be willing to invest in their people and invest in development for themselves and for others. And people are going to follow the example they set. So you mentioned you have some strategies in there. What are some of those strategies that companies could be employing?
Well, so from the leader perspective, the second chapter in the book is about what I call presence. We live in a highly distracted time where push notifications, when you look at the digital workplace itself, how many sources of information or how many tools could you go to exchange a message between you and another employee? I'm looking at on my MacBook right now, I have Teams, I have Skype, I have Outlook, and I have Slack. All is up, and Zoom up talking to you. These are all mechanisms I could use to exchange a message right now with a colleague. On my phone, I have GroupMe, I have SMS. I mean, there are no shortage of ways to connect.
Don't forget, you could actually call them on the phone too.
You could actually pick them up and just say, yeah. So the opportunity for distraction is so great that first and foremost, leaders just need to be present and show up. So some of the tools in there, the TFA loop is one of my favorites. That's kind of thoughts, feelings, actions with your desired results right in the middle. What can we do to kind of focus ourselves, focus our minds? It's the whole mindfulness notion to really kind of ask ourselves, what's the desired result that we're trying to achieve?
Yeah.
And then how do we need to show up in terms of our physical presence, our mental presence, and our behaviors to make sure that we're affecting the change in the organization that we seek to change. When we get to the workforce, I provide a nice audit in the chapter on development. And one of the concepts that I outline is the notion of deep development. Leaders need to go from, again, no shortage of channels and ways of learning and modes of learning that we could invest in. We could invest in instructor-led training. We could invest in, platforms that are piping in curated content from all over the place. But we need to go from a sense of offering our employees and offering our workforce shallow development to offering them deep transformative development, cultivating a sense of lifelong learning in the employees, because training is not just something that you're going to have to do once a year or every couple of years to update your credential. It's really something that has to occur in bite-sized fashion, in a lean fashion, on a daily basis, and then be mixed. Now, lean learning that's just lean and bite-sized, I don't get satisfied with bite-sized appetizers, right? Every now and then I want to sit down and have Thanksgiving. So you have to mix the bite-sized nuggets of self-paced learning with some really deep transformative experiences that change people's mindsets, that help the organization become more agile by really kind of shocking the mindset that we have about the way we used to do work versus the way we need to do work in the future.
Yeah, I like that approach. It's sort of a blended approach, because in the world we live in now, people rely on bite-sized learning in their own personal life, and I think more and more companies are realizing they need to provide that to their employees, but that's not going to change the world. It's not going to change their mindset or how they work. You need that steak every now and then, that bigger dinner, as you mentioned, to use your metaphor, and cultivate that sense of lifelong learning. I heard this that I've mentioned on the podcast a couple of times, but the rate of change is faster than it's ever been before, but it's slower than it's ever going to be, right? So the change is getting faster and faster. New technologies are coming out all the time, which means jobs are changing all the time, right? The future of work is, what is it? The gig economy, different jobs, engineers will need different skills. And so I think it's people that are, number one, are good at developing personal relationships, are going to help them be successful, but also who are lifelong learners, like you mentioned, who are always curious, who don't have that mindset that, oh, I'm quote old, however old you are, 30, 40, 50, 60, and so I'm too old to learn this new technology. Well, you've got to stay on top of the things that are coming. You've got to be willing to learn and have that open mind. I think it's those people that are going to be more successful in the future because things are always changing and they're willing to learn new things.
Yeah, and the mindset change, I mean, there's a lot of work out there that I cite in the book around mindset, whether it's a growth mindset or fixed mindset or an inward or an outward or a this or that. I've really taken a deep dive into how you change a mindset. I've actually got a tool on my blog, leadership4ir.com, called Future Focus that people can take, and it helps you identify what your mindset is today. Are you sort of someone who is higher risk aversion and you lean kind of more as a historian versus someone who leads more into the futurist categories? The research that I've done on this is actually it's a perfect bell curve. Most people are right in the middle. But it allows the science of mindset change by simply understanding that mindsets are flexible and that you can change them. It's not like personality. It's not like you're taking a strengths finder or a Myers-Briggs or a DISC. Those are personality and talent traits that really don't change. Mindsets are actually quite flexible. So whether you're in your 60s and you're kind of embarking on your final phase of your career journey, or whether you're in your 20s and you are just starting out at work, it's great to know where your mindset is today and learn about the concepts of mindsets so that you can evolve it as you go through work, because that will be your competitive advantage as an individual and your organizations as a company.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I think mindset is so important. It's being talked about more than ever, but still not talked about that much in the corporate world. And this
No,
idea of fixed versus growth mindset, I talk about it a lot on here. The book Mindset by Dr. Carol Dweck
it's
absolutely
great
changed
book.
my life, and I think has
Yes.
done so for many other people. And it's one of the most recommended books on this podcast. But still, to think about leadership and how you're going into the future and having the right mindset, that growth mindset where you feel like, yes, there is always more for me to learn. Yes, I'm willing to try new things and try hard things and be willing to fail, because that's the culture we need in order to be innovative, versus the historian mindset you mentioned, or the fixed mindset that like, well, I'm good at this, I'm not going to go outside of my lane, I'm an quote expert in this. I think once people even start referring to themselves as an expert, sorry to anybody that does, you get yourself into a trap that you're not going to be
Yeah.
able to pivot.
I hate that it says expert in my bio. I really should have those folks who help me with that edit that out, because I always try to, every client engagement, every relationship I make, I really do try to approach it like a novice, not an expert, and just ask well, why are we doing it this way?
Yeah.
What have you learned by doing it this way before? Well, it doesn't work, and we trip over ourselves. Well, what have you done about that in the past? And eventually you can help get clients to that aha, that maybe we do, maybe the problem is us.
Yeah. So, Chris, you've been doing a lot of work with different companies and you've been with Slalom for the last year. From a talent or organizational development standpoint, what would you say has been your greatest accomplishment so far? So the thing that you're most proud of?
Oh, well, we are at Slalom Detroit. We're in our third year. We're at about 120 employees now. And what's neat about Slalom, we're a modern consulting organization that really focuses on strategy, business transformation, and technology. But we do it in a local model. So we only work with companies in the market that we're in. So we have 27 markets, Detroit being one of the newer ones in the last few years. And so my biggest talent accomplishment is one that, really I learned back in my days with the Gallup organization, which is you got to hire for great talent. So as I'm in a build mode and I'm building my team and my practice, I select for the mindset that I want our clients to experience, because we do things different here at Slalom. It's a different model. And so I try to hire for talent and fit and mindset, and then equip them with the tool set and the skill set that they may or may not be lacking. So I really do think hiring for excellence is where it all begins.
That's so cool. And you're obviously building something great up there. It's been growing, and Detroit making a comeback. So it seems like you're on that upward trend as Detroit's coming back, or so I hear. I've only been there once, but I'll have to get up there another time.
You should come up, Andy. if you've ever heard bad things about Detroit, you're going to go back and tell those people that they're full of it. I have on and off lived here for the last 40 years, and I was in Chicago for the last 5. And when I came downtown, where Slalom's offices are right here on Campus Martias, and I got out of my Uber. It wasn't an autonomous Uber. It was actually had a driver.
Yeah.
But when I got out of the Uber, I was surrounded by Microsoft, StockX, which is one of the hottest growing companies on the internet today and here in Detroit, Quicken Loans. Everything that's going on down here is just tremendous, and we at Slalom are happy to be helping our clients build better futures and a better life for the good people here in Detroit.
Very cool. I like it. Well, that's a pretty great accomplishment. With a growth mindset, I've got to ask the other side, which is, what has been your biggest failure or mistake, maybe from a talent perspective or a leadership perspective, and what did you learn from it?
Wow. Yeah, fail fast, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think early on it is underestimating truly the amount of work that it takes to be chief marketing officer, chief talent officer, chief financial officer, sales guy, client delivery guy of your practice. It is the need for quickly building that second layer of leadership that can be empowered to make decisions, not to build a hierarchy for the sake of hierarchy, but really to build a talented group of leaders who can help you scale. That's been one of the kind of most difficult lessons to learn, is that how quickly you need that. Even with when you have a team of 3 and you're growing, you need somebody else who can be in that big, important meeting. So that's been a lesson learned. But we've got an awesome talent acquisition team here and a great pipeline of candidates who can help us grow.
Cool. So trying to do too much and then probably not doing any of those things very well when you get really stretched.
You've been there.
I've done this before. Yeah, I'm doing it now, actually.
Yeah,
I finally just hired my first assistant. I've got an editor for the podcast, but originally I was trying to do everything myself, and it's not easy or possible.
One of my great colleagues here at Slalom Detroit says the magic's in the middle, and it is, because it's really about building the next generation of leaders, the next empowered group of leaders who can help take the message and the delivery of a solution to the world.
Yeah. Are there any other big trends you're following with regards to people development, leadership development?
I mean, there's so much on the digital workplace experience, DWX. That's kind of, you're taking a note. I see you're taking a note, Andy. Digital workplace experience is just something that we're so focused on here with our clients as they reimagine the customer experience for the last I'd say, I don't know, 5 years, and it remains as it should, but the customer experience has been such a huge focus of organizations, really looking at what makes a great digital workplace experience and what are the components of a great digital workplace. We're on the cutting edges of learning what those characteristics are and how to create a better employee experience, to drive a better digital customer experience, to create business value and to create long-lasting digital relationships between organizations and customers. So DWX is something that is on my mind and that I do a lot of whiteboarding about, and I think about pretty much at least one time a day.
Very cool. Is there a book that has had a big impact on you or that you often recommend?
Did I mention Future Ready?
Besides your own book.
No. Oh man, there have been so many of my favorites that I cite in here too. Um, Not all of them are business books. One of them is everybody has to read The Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge.
Mm.
That is absolutely one of the most revolutionary books of the 20th century. Learning about systems and systems thinking. Uh, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl is one that I just absolutely love. When you look at the purpose revolution that we're in right now, that is a tremendous, tremendous book. And then I am even though I'm a scholar of human behavior, I'm also a scholar of human language. I really love how language shapes how we think and shapes our mindset. Anything by Mikhail Bakhtin, who was a Russian philologist back in the Stalinist era. His thinking about discourse in society and how, as we become more digital, the ways in which we interact with media really do shape society. And his ideas are as relevant today as they were back under Stalin.
Man, a lot of good recommendations there. Man's Search.
Sorry, maybe deeper than you wanted to go.
No, I love it. I love it. Man's Search for Meaning. I mean, of course, one of the most influential books of all time, especially on psychology and human behavior. You mentioned that book in relation to a purpose revolution. I don't know if I've really heard that term. Can you explain more what you mean by that, and how do companies take advantage of that? Because I think I know, but I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I mean, any search for purpose on Amazon, you'll get a ton of books that come up. I think at Slalom, we've done some great work with Simon Sinek on defining our why, and but really looking at not so much what people get paid to do or how you can do your job better, which really define. I mean, those are very much two IR and one IR concepts about the fail and the Taylor mechanics, the Six Sigma of how we do work and how we can do work more efficiently, effectively. I believe that the purpose revolution that we're in is really about understanding why we do the work that we do, what it will take to build and shape a better future that's based on our values. I believe that the work that we do as leaders should be driven by clearly understanding our why and how we're aligned around that why. Actually, the last chapter in my book is focus. It's not the ethics chapter. It's the discernment chapter, and it's about how do we make values-based, purpose-driven decisions differently when the complexity and the stakes of the technologies and what they might mean. Does the autonomous vehicle hit the old woman crossing the street, or does it hit the school bus full of children? Some human has to program that decision. So as leaders, thinking about what our values are, what our purpose is, and how that will impact the work that we do, starting with our why, is a really important part of work today. And so I do feel that we're well into this purpose-driven revolution, but it's gonna get harder before it gets easier.
Yeah, and man, that person crossing the street versus the school bus is such a crazy, interesting debate. That people could talk about. We could talk about that all day. But
Yeah.
you're right. People are talking more about their purpose. Studies show younger generations are more
Millennials. Yep.
vocal in wanting to have worked for a place that has a purpose or connects to their purpose. They want to know what they're doing, where their career is going.
Right.
How all that connects. And I think even older generation wants that. They weren't vocal about it before, right? But everybody wants to know, how does the work I'm doing, not everybody, a lot of people haven't thought about it yet, but they're starting to hear more about it. How does this connect to my purpose and my why? On that note, I've had this question in my mind. Do you think that it is normal and acceptable that someone might have a personal purpose and a work purpose, and they would be pretty separate?
Oh, I see it every day. I
Yeah.
see it every day, and it's sad when you encounter someone who is disengaged in their work
Mm-hmm.
and really their purpose is one of, they're working as an engineer, but they really love, music.
Yeah.
Um, and for me, this is very close to home as I watched my father spend, 30 plus years in a career that he didn't enjoy.
Mm.
And music was really his why. It is his why. It's what he's doing in retirement now. So seeing him and my grandfather go through something very similar, working for a large company here in the Detroit area. When I found out about what my neighbor did with the Leaders on the Ropes course, I, relative to what I saw with the men in my family who worked, I made a promise to myself that at a very early age, because I said, well, you sleep for 8 hours a day, you
Mm.
work for 8 hours a day, and of course we work for much more than 8 hours a day now.
Yeah.
That only gives you 8 other hours in the day. And I made a commitment to myself that whatever I did, I would have fun doing.
Mm.
And so, after I had written the book and I had found Slalom, one of our values is smile. Our consultants are different because we show up, and one, we don't have suitcases, and two, we're the ones who are smiling and actually having fun what we do. Uh,
Nice.
it did really feel like I was coming home to a place where my purpose and my passion for helping leaders transform their businesses were one and the same.
I love that. I'm so big on living an intentional life and aligning what I'm doing with my purpose, my personal purpose and my business purpose, which tend to be a little bit different, but also interconnected. And that's why I love what I do, which is, working with companies to connect them with awesome programs and experiences to help their people do the best work of their lives. And I get to live and operate how I want. And I hope a lot of other people are thinking about how they live their life, where they work, how that connects. And, you can't always make drastic changes, but there are opportunities out there to make shifts if you're conscious about it and you're thinking about what you want to do and how you want to live your life.
There are, and all it takes is is a webcam and a or an iPhone, and an idea, and you can amplify, or something very analog, a paintbrush and a canvas, and you just take a picture and put it on Instagram,
Yep.
and you can amplify your passion across the world in ways that people one or two generations removed can't even get their head around.
Right.
There are some of us who are so lucky to be able to sit in front of a webcam, talk to interesting people around the country or around the
Right.
world, make
Right.
friends, share ideas, and get paid to do it. And it's truly a gift.
It is really cool. And anybody can start a podcast. I mean, look at me. So, and people will listen to it.
All
Which
right.
is
If you
just
build it,
crazy.
we will
If you
listen.
actually have talent, then you might be even better off.
Right.
So, Chris, for anybody that wants to get the book or find out more about what you're doing, where's the best place for them to go?
Well, they can contact me on LinkedIn. They can check out my blog, where I mentioned some of these resources are at leadership, the number 4ir.com. They can contact us at Slalom Detroit. If they're in the area, we'd love to connect with them and talk about some of these ideas. And I'm sure you'll have links to this and some other resources through your site.
Absolutely. And the book again is called Future Ready Leadership Strategies for the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Such an important topic. Things are changing all the time. And I hope you out there, if you're listening, you're thinking about how your job might change, how your company might change, how your industry might change, and how you might get ready for that if things are completely different in the next 5 years. Chris, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure talking to you and hearing about some of the things you've been working on. I know we could talk so much longer, and I hope we do get a chance to talk again. But I do appreciate you coming and sharing some of your wisdom and experience with our listeners. So thanks again for coming on the Talent Development Hot Seat.
Great to be in the hot seat, Andy, and I look forward to connecting again. Thank you very much.
All right, take care.